Late at night, my stomach was killing me, so I called Charles. I can't leave right now. Just take some painkillers. The power is out at Alice's place, and she's scared being alone with the kid. I can't rest easy. I opened my notes and jotted down, the 77th time. It's the 77th time he's ditched me for Alice and the kid. July 7th is my birthday and our wedding anniversary. Charles and I always celebrate it with gusto. So on July 6th this year, I was animatedly sharing my plans for the next day with Charles. How about we go do some glass blowing later? You love that, right? And then we'll hit that Wagyu place you've been wanting to try. Plus, there's a new movie out that's just your thing. I listed excitedly. Charles frowned and cut me off. Judy, I might not make it. Alice said William's got a parent-child sports day, and she can't handle it alone, so I need to go. The smile on my face froze. Alice again? Charles stayed quiet, and frustration welled up inside me. Can't she just skip the sports stuff? What kind of role are you playing with them at this thing anyway? Doesn't she have other friends? Charles furrowed his brow, looking at me. Ivy helped raise William too. If someone else goes, he'll act up. Charles reminisced fondly about William, his face softened. But when he looked at me, his brow creased again. He's a kid, why are you fussing about him? I turned away, heading to the room with a cold expression. Charles grabbed me, impatiently yelling. Judy! Aren't you done with this tantrum? It's just an anniversary. Can't I make it up to you in a few days? Alice is going through enough, and when she reaches out to me, how can I say no? His eyes were full of disappointment as he looked at me. Why are you so stubborn? No wonder even your parents didn't want you. Stunned, I stared at him, feeling my heart sink into an icy pit. 3 years ago, he proposed to me. We discussed when to register for our marriage license. He suggested doing it on my birthday. I hesitated, telling him that my parents abandoned me on that day. They pretended to take me to KFC to celebrate, left saying they were buying a cake, and never came back. At that time, he held my hand, looking at me with empathetic eyes. Judy, I know something terrible happened on your birthday. Let's get married on that day so you can replace those old memories with new ones. That way, your birthday will remind you of our wedding day instead. I showed him my weakest spot, and now he's using it to hurt me. I stood there, numb, mechanically asking. Can you give me a straight answer? When will you focus back on our home? Charles stammered, his eyes darting around. Well, you can take care of yourself. We don't have kids yet, but Alice and William can't manage without me. Seeing my sour expression, he added unconvincingly, maybe when we have kids or when William's a bit older. My heart kept sinking, exhausted by it all. Fine, go tomorrow. I'll be here. Charles beamed, giving me a big hug. Judy, I knew you'd understand me. You always do. Not 3 seconds passed before he let go, calling Alice. Alice, I'll pick you and William up in the morning. The next day, Charles was up early, humming while picking clothes from the wardrobe, smiling while on the phone. William, don't worry, I'll be the best dressed and make you proud, okay? What about Mom? Is she all dolled up? I'm on my way to get you guys. Watching him, it felt like they were the real family of 3, and I was the outsider intruding. Charles hung up, looking at me as I sat up, and tried to soothe me. Judy, you're the best. You can use my card today, okay? He took out a card and, when I didn't take it, left it on the nightstand. He leaned over to kiss my cheek, but his ringing phone interrupted. Alice, you all set? Okay, I'm on my way, be there in 5. Charles answered while hurriedly heading out. I didn't touch his card. I didn't like going out alone. I got up, grabbed an egg and some greens from the fridge, planning to make myself birthday noodles. I served the noodles and picked up my phone, just to see loads of messages from Alice flood in. She sent tons of photos and said, Judy, Charles told me today's your anniversary. I'm really sorry, but I didn't expect he'd choose to be with me on your special day. Here are some photos so you can share in our happy vibe. I opened the dozens of pictures she sent. There were ones with Charles happily holding William, ones of Charles and William doing sports. In almost every photo, Charles gazed at the child, his eyes full of affection and fondness. Alice appeared in some too, Charles cradling the child while she clung to his arm, her head leaning on his shoulder. All three wore bright, contented smiles. If the guy in those pictures weren't my husband, I'd say, what a happy family of three. So enviable. But he is, so my stomach churned, and I rushed to the bathroom, vomiting up the noodles I had just eaten. So disgusting. I took out the wedding anniversary gift I had prepared for Charles ages ago. I looked at it again and again, then tossed it into the trash can in the living room. The trash can had just had its bag changed and was right at the entrance, in the most noticeable spot. I didn't want to hand the gift to him myself, but I hoped he'd be thoughtful enough to notice my little tantrum. At 11 p.m., Charles was still not home. He called and said, "Judy, I have something going on, I'll be back late tonight. Don't wait up for me." He paused awkwardly and added, "It's work stuff." And Charles didn't come back all night long. I wanted to wait for him, thinking maybe he'd notice the surprise in the living room trash. I fell asleep groggily on the couch. Around 6 in the morning, I was woken up by a vibrating text message. It was from Charles. "Things were hectic yesterday, and I didn't want to disturb you, so I stayed out all night. I'm heading home now and bringing you breakfast. What do you want? How about that porridge from the place you love in the north of the city? That place always has a long line, and some people even pay others to get it for them. It's far from us and tough to buy. So even though I love it, the last time I had it was ages ago when Charles had a meeting over there." Thinking about all that, I softened up and texted back with a fine. In less than half an hour, Charles showed up at home with a thermos in hand. I quickly walked to the door with a smile and took the thermos from him. "How'd you get it so fast? Isn't there always a line there?" Charles looked awkward as he stammered out, "There were too many people waiting, so I bought seafood porridge from next door. Try it, it tastes good." I drank some on the way, so there's not much left. I opened the thermos to find a small, cold serving of seafood porridge. I closed the lid and calmly looked at him. "Charles, I'm allergic to seafood." Charles visibly panicked and stuttered, "There's hardly any seafood in it. It should be fine, right? William ate a lot of it. I mean, I asked the owner to put less seafood in since I remember your allergy. Besides, what's the big deal? You're an orphan, why be so picky?" I looked at him silently. Maybe he forgot. When we first got together, he took me to eat seafood and proudly handed me the menu, saying, "Judy, you've never had seafood, right? I got paid today, eat whatever you want, it's on me." We ate a lot that day, and it was also the first time I learned about my seafood allergy. When the ambulance took me to the hospital, Charles was crying as he held my hand. When I woke up, he promised, "Judy, I'll definitely remember your seafood allergy this time." But now he says eating seafood isn't a big deal and asks why I'm being fussy because I'm an orphan. I went to the bedroom without a word. When I looked at my phone, I saw Alice had tweeted an hour ago. In the picture, a tall, handsome man was wearing a cute cartoon apron. It was Charles. He was focused on cooking seafood on the countertop. Alice captioned it, "Seafood porridge tastes great." I wasn't sure if it was because the line for the pork congee was too long and he didn't want to spend the time, or because he thought the leftover seafood porridge shouldn't go to waste. Either way, the result was he brought back leftover seafood porridge he and she had shared. Things didn't start off this bad. Alice was Charles's first love and childhood friend. Charles and I got together in college, and she often contacted him back then. It was clear she had feelings for Charles, but he made me feel assured. He'd show me their chats, his passwords were all my birth date, and he included me in all his gatherings. At our wedding, Alice attended with tears in her eyes. She watched Charles with reluctance throughout the ceremony, and I worried she might do something. But she didn't. She soon moved overseas, reportedly married a foreign guy, and gradually lost touch with Charles. Until news came of her marriage breaking down, and she returned to the country with her child. A newly returned Alice, struggling alone, turned to the only friend she had in this city, Charles. The bond from their shared childhood and sympathy for her single parenting made Charles feel a hint of guilt. Guilt from believing our quick marriage pushed Alice into a failed one. Charles helped her time and again, and I tolerated it each time. I got a bit jealous and acted a little petty. He'd stroke my head, letting me lean into him, and say, if I hadn't turned her down, Alice wouldn't have rushed abroad to marry that foreign guy. I have some responsibility. Little William is so young, I can't feel at ease. Our Judy is the understanding one, right? Once they settle down, I won't be involved anymore, okay? So when Alice didn't know how to cook, one call and Charles would leave the dinner he made for us and rush over to cook for her and her son. He didn't originally know how to cook, but for them, Charles practically became a restaurant chef now. Just order them takeout. I made a whole table of food. The additives in takeout aren't good for a growing child. How can they eat junk? When Alice's TV broke, one call and Charles would leave the movie we were watching arm in arm to fix it for her. He wasn't handy, but now he's practically a repairman for them. Get a repair guy. Haven't you been waiting to see this movie for a while? It's fine, they're on their own. I wouldn't be at ease letting a stranger in. Once, just as Charles and I were in the moment, Alice called in a panic, Charles, William's been vomiting and has diarrhea, you need to come over now. I wrapped my arms around Charles's neck, trying to kiss him. Can you call 911, please? Charles turned his head to avoid my kiss, quickly got up, and started getting dressed. Sure, I'll head over right away. Wait for me. William was sick, and I was worried. Judy, don't mess with the kids, okay? Later, Charles told me that Alice took William out, let him have hot pot, followed by ice cream and fried chicken, which led to his acute gastroenteritis. Charles held me close, blaming Alice, but in a tone filled with tenderness. Alice, seriously, she's clueless. What would William do without her? She probably couldn't survive without me. Not like Judy, who's so capable and independent. His feelings toward Alice shifted from sympathy and guilt to pity and favoritism. I noted in my memo how often he left me to spend time with Alice and William. As of today, it was the 75th time. I thought about the bowl of leftover seafood porridge and felt a wave of nausea come over me again. Lately, I've been feeling short of breath and queasy, not really sure what's going on. I stayed upset in the room for a while, and Charles hadn't come in to check on me. When I finally opened the door, I found the thermos was thrown into the living room trash can, and Charles was gone. I picked up the trash can, and there it was, my wedding anniversary gift for him. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. It was obvious, but he never noticed. I called Charles several times, but he didn't answer. So I went to the hospital on my own. After a series of tests, the doctor smiled at me. Congratulations, you're pregnant. Pregnant? I've been hoping for a child with Charles for so long, but why now? I stared blankly at the pregnancy report and dialed Charles's number. Charles, I have something to tell you. It was noisy on his end, lots of kids' voices. He raised his tone to speak to me. I'm at the mall with William. Can we talk when I get home? Before I could respond, he hung up. I noticed the mall he mentioned was close to the hospital. I went over, ready to call Charles to ask where he was. William likes this race car, so you're buying it again? We already have a pile of these at home. Be careful, you'll spoil him. It was Charles. He was in a suit, holding a boy with a toy car, with Alice jokingly scolding him. Charles had a smile on his face too. It's just a car. What matters is William loves it. The little boy proudly turned to his mom. I knew it, Dad loves me more than anything. Their happy smiles disappeared when they saw me. Judy, what brings you here? Charles looked at me awkwardly, let go of William's hand, and walked over to hold mine. Alice immediately put on a smile, patting William on the shoulder. William, this is Aunt. Charles is Dad. Alice is Mom. I'm Aunt. I looked at Charles, who held my hand, slightly embarrassed. William snorted, "I won't call her aunt. She's the bad woman ruining my parents' relationship, right?" He charged at me with his toy car, muttering, "Witch, go away." I instinctively protected my belly, stepping back a few steps. He couldn't stop, tipped forward, and fell to the floor. Charles dropped my hand to help William up. I lost my balance and sat down hard. William wailed, and Alice rushed to comfort him. Charles frowned at me, upset. "Judy, you're being unreasonable. William's just a kid, and you're picking a fight with him?" I was still on the floor, my stomach in pain, struggling to breathe. Charles and Alice fussed over William, but no one helped me up. I gathered a few breaths, managed to stand, but Charles grabbed my wrist tightly. "Apologize to William." He looked at me seriously. I was about to fall over. Charles didn't seem to realize how hard he was squeezing. My wrist had red marks. The 76th time, I mentally noted. I raised my left hand and slapped him across the face. "Are you okay?" I asked coldly. "This kid has such a foul mouth, and you want me to apologize when he should? You say you raised William, but he calls me a witch, insults me, and tries to knock me down. I might let it go because he's a child, but as his guardians, shouldn't you and Alice be the ones apologizing to me?" I looked at Charles coldly. He was stunned, touching his cheek where I slapped him, staring at me incredulously. "Judy, you?" Charles seemed to want to say more. But I couldn't take it any longer and threw up. My patience had reached its limit, just like with Charles and Alice's relationship. Tears from nausea and hurt and frustration flowed uncontrollably. Seeing me cry, Charles grew flustered. He instinctively let go of William's hand and walked over to me. "Judy, what's going on?" Charles caringly patted my back, pulling out tissues with Hello Kitty designs, tenderly wiping my mouth. I remembered how, whenever I was upset before, he'd dress up as Hello Kitty to cheer me up. He said he was my Hello Kitty, who'd always understand, accompany, and protect me. Can't control my emotions, and tears just keep streaming down. "Judy, please stop crying. I'll take you back to rest right now." Charles talks to me gently like he used to, but now it just makes me feel sick. I pull my hand away, and his expression freezes. He looks at me, surprised, and another moment later, his gaze turns dim. William runs over and pulls on him. "Dad, come home with me and Mom, don't worry about this bad woman." Alice quickly follows and pulls William back. "Don't say that, this is Uncle Charles's wife, you should call her aunt." She then bends down and softly talks to me. "Judy, Charles and I grew up together. If we wanted to be together, we would have done it long ago. Don't worry about us. He's just helping me out as a single mom. It's my fault for being useless and not being able to handle things after leaving him." William has never had a dad, so he sees Charles, who spends the most time with him, as his daddy. "Hope you don't mind. I'll talk to him about it when we get back." Her calm demeanor made it seem like I was the irrational one. "We'll go home first, Charles. Take care of Judy." William rolled his eyes and made a face at me before running to Charles. "Dad, Mom, and I will wait for you at home." Charles didn't correct him for calling him Dad, just patted his head with a smile. "Okay, you go back first. I'll visit when I can." He watches them leave, sighs, and looks at me with reproach. "You see, even kids try to accommodate you. What more do you want? William hasn't had a dad since he was little. Can't you give him a little grace? Alice is raising a kid on her own, and I thought you'd understand, but you're being unreasonable. When did you become like this?" I looked at the mark on his face and with all my might slapped the other side of his face. Was it my fault that Alice doesn't have a husband and William doesn't have a dad? Alice failed to take responsibility for her marriage herself. I don't owe her anything, nor do I need to sacrifice my husband and family. Alice is your friend, but that doesn't concern me. Haven't I let you help her enough over the years? How much more gracious do you want me to be? I was about to say more, but suddenly everything went black, and I fell to the ground. When I woke up, I was in bed at home. Charles came rushing over from the kitchen with a spatula in hand as soon as he heard me moving. Rest a little longer, the porridge is almost ready. He handed me a glass of water to drink after helping me sit up. Spend a night at home, and if you still don't feel well tomorrow, I'll take you to the hospital, okay? He keeps saying the same things, making me waver. I felt the pregnancy checkup report in my pocket, took a deep breath, and looked at Charles. I need to talk to you about something. He patted my head and walked back to the kitchen. Drink the porridge first. He brought a bowl. I set the pregnancy report on the table and was about to speak when his phone rang. Okay, don't worry, I'll be right over. He hung up and was ready to leave, grabbing his coat. He overlooked the report, setting the bowl on top of it. Judy, drink the porridge. I'll wash the bowl when I return. Eat and rest up, I'll be back soon. I'll cook whatever you want when you wake up. Still feeling unwell, I didn't touch the porridge and fell asleep. Late into the night, I was woken by sharp stomach pains, like a bunch of durians rolling inside me. Through the pain, I tried to call Charles. Charles, I'm really not feeling well. Please drive me to the hospital. On the other end, William's voice was clear. Dad, keep playing the shadow game with me. Charles replied softly, Judy, I can't leave right now. Take some painkillers. The power's out at Alice's place, and she's scared with just the kid. I can't leave them. I felt a chill spread from head to toe and quietly said, 77th time. I gave you 77 chances, Charles. This is your final one. Charles chuckled softly, Judy, don't throw a tantrum. You were fine when I left. Don't worry about what a child says, okay? In the end, I took a cab to the hospital by myself. I had a miscarriage. Lying in a room filled with the scent of disinfectant, I touched my belly, silently staring at the white wall. The doctor tried to comfort me. Your body wasn't ready for this pregnancy. It was protecting you. Don't be too upset. My body was protecting me. It took so many years for me to understand that the only one who can truly protect me is myself. Exhausted, I drifted to sleep, and when I woke up, Charles was by my bedside looking haggard. He was my emergency contact. Maybe the doctor reached him. Seeing me awake, he trembled, trying to take my hand. I'm sorry, Judy, I didn't know you were pregnant. I pulled my hand away and looked out the window. Let's get a divorce. Charles's tears fell on my hand. He wiped them off with my other hand and pulled further away. He reached several times before finally grabbing my hand. Judy, I was wrong. I shouldn't have ignored your feelings while taking care of Alice and William. I didn't know it was this severe. Just give me one more chance. I looked at him coldly and played the phone recording from that night on my phone. I told you, this is your last chance. Charles's eyes dimmed, and he agreed to divorce me. Judy, I agree, but during the 1-month divorce cooling-off period, can I take care of you? You just had a miscarriage, and I'm worried. After being discharged, we finalized the divorce. He took me home and took care of me meticulously, even taking annual leave from work for it. I accepted his care calmly. He prepared different nutritious meals for me every day. He sat by my bed telling me unique bedtime stories, repeatedly asking for my forgiveness. But the disappointment over 77 times made it impossible for me to trust him again because of our relationship. I was unwilling to leave and gave him 77 chances. Now that there's nothing left in this relationship, I just want out. Charles's phone rang non-stop, and I knew it was Alice. Unable to reach him directly, she bombarded him with messages. Charles, I'm not feeling well, can you take me to the hospital? Charles, William misses you, could you come see him? Charles, the lights are out again, and it's scary. Can you fix them? I scoffed at the messages. Charles couldn't stand my attitude and deleted all of Alice's contacts from his phone. I saw numerous missed calls and unread messages on his phone because of my miscarriage. But how long would a child's miscarriage keep him mindful? A month? 2 months? Alice is still there, William is still there, and the root of the problem still exists. He might refuse once or twice, but after a while, would he really be able to ignore and disregard them? I don't believe it. Alice, anxious about Charles's attitude, even visited with William under the pretense of checking on me. Charles looked at her guardedly. Her eyes welled up with tears. Did Judy say something? I don't know what I did wrong. Why are you doing this to me? Charles pushed her hand away coldly. Your issues with your son have nothing to do with our marriage. It was a favor to help you before. Now not helping is also normal. William tugged at Charles's shirt. Daddy, do you not want us anymore? Charles couldn't bear to be harsh with the child he raised and just patted his head. William, I'm your uncle, you have your own dad, and I will have my own kids, okay? You're a big boy now, take care of your mom. William, looking pitiful, pulled Charles towards the door. Charles glanced at me helplessly but followed William into the living room. Once Charles left, Alice immediately dropped the act. She crossed her arms and looked down at me. Why are you still clinging to Charles? He and I grew up together, you can't compete with our bond. You saw he can't say no to William. He'll eventually leave you and come back to me. I smirked. I've suggested divorce long ago. He wanted to win me back and keep me around. What can I do? You'll have to try harder. Alice was speechless and fumed. Just you wait. Turning around, she sweetly held William's hand. Charles, take good care of Judy, we won't disturb you anymore. Let's go. Closing the door, Charles looked at me awkwardly. William is still a kid. I can't just ignore him. I interrupted him. Charles, when the doctor told me I miscarried, I was more relieved than sad. A look of pain crossed Charles's face. He tightened his grip, opened his mouth, but said nothing. I'm glad this child didn't come into the world because it wasn't your first choice. I thought, if I had the baby, and our child and William got sick at the same time, what would you do? Without hesitation, Charles said, confidently, then you'd take care of William because you'd feel he's fatherless and pitiful. You'd think Alice isn't familiar with many things since she returned from abroad, that she'd be lost without you. But did you ever consider she'd only been gone a few years and didn't waste all those years in the country? You might initially feel guilty toward our child, but that guilt would fade because you think it doesn't matter. I'm your wife, it's your kid, you'll have many chances to treat us well. But I'm telling you, there aren't. Disappointment is accumulative. I've saved up plenty with you, so now I'm leaving. But I don't want our child to suffer like I did. You tell our child, you have a dad, he doesn't, why can't you give in? Why can't you be more understanding? A child with a dad, but feels dadless. Like me, having a husband, yet it feels like I don't. Charles stepped back, stunned, shaking his head. Would never, how could I do that? I looked at him calmly. You wouldn't? So what have you been doing to me all along? Charles went pale. He clutched my hand tightly. Judy, I'll change, I will, just don't leave me. I slowly pushed his hand away. Alice moved faster than I thought. When I woke up this morning, there were 2 pictures in my inbox, Alice and Charles, barely clothed, lying together. I forwarded the photos to Charles, and just like that, he stopped bothering me. We got divorced successfully. He chose to leave with nothing. His salary was always handed over to me, and before the divorce, he transferred his house and car to my name. Judy, take care. Judy, whether you believe it or not, I still love you. Love? That kind of love, I definitely don't want. I cleaned out all of Charles's belongings from the house, took a long leave from work, and signed up for a European tour. I was ready to take a vacation in Europe. I watched the lights of the Eiffel Tower illuminate from a cruise on the Seine River, enjoyed mango-flavored artisanal ice cream on a dreamy slope in Grindelwald, and climbed the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore to overlook Florence. After spending half a year in Europe, I felt cleansed. The issues with Charles and Alice seemed to no longer bother me. Half a year later, when I returned home, I felt completely at peace. After coming back, I got a gym membership. The gossipy gym owner told me about Charles and Alice's recent events. Not long after I left, under Alice's pressure, Charles married her. They only registered, didn't have a wedding. People gossiped about Charles remarrying so quickly, but Alice didn't care. She eagerly packed her bags, ready to move into my house with William. Staring at the locked door, she realized Charles had left everything behind. She tried to play the victim with Charles, but he wasn't having it. "We wronged Judy. I should leave with nothing." Charles stopped cooking for her, told her to order takeout on her own, didn't repair things for her, and spent day and night at work, rarely coming home. Even when William was sick, he merely told Alice to call an ambulance herself. He no longer wanted William to call him Dad because it reminded him of the child that was lost because of him. Alice was furious, locking herself in a room without eating or drinking. She smugly thought Charles would come to comfort her and give in, just like every time before. But Charles didn't come. Alice cried out, "You weren't like this before." Charles calmly watched her. "I used to help you because I thought you only went abroad out of spite for me getting married and ended up in a bad marriage. Why should I help you now? You climbed into my bed while I was still with Judy. What kind of person does that make you? You wanted me to marry you and I did, but to expect the same as before? No way." Alice broke down, crying hysterically. Charles just watched her quietly. "A few days before I got back, they divorced. The day after I returned, Charles called, eager to meet. I was in great spirits after my trip, applied some light makeup, and wore a simple, elegant dress. Seeing Charles shocked me. He looked much thinner, sitting dejectedly by the cafe window. His eyes were dim, only lighting up when he saw me walk in. He stood and pulled out a chair for me. I thanked him and sat down gracefully. He seemed a bit nervous, pushing a coffee towards me. "Your favorite, caramel macchiato. This place makes it well." After I took a sip, he cautiously asked, "Judy, have you been doing okay?" I wiped the coffee off my lips with a napkin and nodded, "Pretty good." Charles hung his head for a moment before looking up hopefully. "Can you give me another chance?" I laughed gently and asked, "Do you think that's possible?" The light in Charles's eyes faded. "Right, it's impossible. I've found someone new." I paused. "He's smarter than you, more reliable, and loves me more. Most importantly, she will never betray me." Charles got anxious. "Who is it, Judy? You can't trust someone so easily. Let me tell you, men. That person is me." I smiled. "I need to learn to love myself before moving on to the next person I like." Charles relaxed at first, then his face clouded when I mentioned someone new. He was about to say something when his phone rang. He glanced at it, his face darkening. "Alice, right? Who would have thought her call would interrupt our conversation even after our divorce?" I've let go completely and joked with Charles. "Judy, I've divorced her. We're not in contact anymore. She's just been bothering me." Charles kept rejecting calls, and Alice kept trying. Eventually, he answered. Alice's voice was loud. I heard her clearly. "William's missing. Come quick." Charles looked at me, hesitated, but ultimately ran out. See? If I hadn't chosen divorce back then, there would have been a 78th, 79th time, even a 100th, 200th after that later. When I was at the gym, the owner gossiped more. Alice had taken William to the amusement park. She let go briefly, and William disappeared. They still hadn't found him. Alice blames Charles for everything. "We wouldn't have lost him if you hadn't divorced me, forcing me to take him out alone." Charles blames Alice. "You took him out and didn't watch him properly." They pointed fingers, and Alice even began having mental issues. I stopped concerning myself with them and applied to a university in Spain. I planned to study a master's in design for a year or two, something I'm passionate about. I'm thinking of living in Europe for a while, soaking up the sun on southern Europe's islands. The 77 disappointments from Charles once shrouded my world in darkness. But after seeing more of the world, I realized when my small existence is set against the vast lands and the sea, what really matters anyway?